You don't need to follow strict rituals of mystical and spiritual teachings. You don't need to force yourself to practice something that feels not natural. You can become self-aware through relationships. This is the most natural alternative to any rigid spiritual or religious teaching, because you don't need to go to monastery and you don't need to find yourself a cave. Your ashram is your kitchen, your bedroom, your everyday life, and those very people that live next to you and that you meet every day are your spiritual teachers. Today I'm going to tell you exactly how this works based on my own experience. By the end of this video, you will not only be able to see how it works, but to also identify which stage are you at, which might give you a serious push to your further development. First of all, this is not a new idea. The idea that another person can be your shortest path to self-awareness, to consciousness, to God, to presence, call it whatever you like, has been there for centuries, even thousands of years, and has been reflected in different mystical, religious, psychological traditions. To name just a few, probably the most direct formulation of this idea one can find in Tantra, both Buddhist and Hindu, where the union of feminine and masculine is first experienced through external union and then inner unity, Shiva and Shakti, pure consciousness and energy, method and wisdom. In the highest form of Tantra, the external union is unnecessary altogether, but without experiencing it through another person, many people simply don't get there. In the mystical branches of so-called Abrahamic religions, Christianity, Islam, Judaism, this idea is expressed more subtly, but very strongly. In Christian mysticism, for instance, this idea appears as a knowledge that God can be encountered through another person. Love your neighbor as yourself is the idea that love to another person is a path to God. The famous Christian mystic Meister Eckhart took this idea to its limit, saying that God can only be discovered within, but often through the friction with another person, because the other is the place where the illusion of separation disappears. In the Sufi tradition, there is the idea of the mirror of the heart. A teacher or a beloved one is seen as someone in whom God is reflected. Ibn Arabi has almost literal formulation of this idea. A person comes to know God through the forms they love, which means that love in any form is not a mistake, it's a channel. But it's important to understand, if you cling to the form, the person, the process freezes. But if you move through it, the source reveals itself. In Kabbalah, there is an idea of restoring unity through relationships. The feminine and masculine are not just about people, but about cosmic aspects of the divine. Their union in a person, in a couple, in the world, is an act of returning to wholeness. Love becomes not just a feeling, but a repair of separation. In Buddhism, especially Mahayana, this idea is expressed differently, but the essence is the same. Another person breaks the illusion of fixed self and reveals interdependence. In relationships, it becomes especially obvious. There is no separate me without the other. In Zen, this can look almost harsh. The teacher breaks the student through contact, through paradox and tension. The other is not for comfort, but it's a tool for awakening. Different Vedic traditions, from yoga to bhakti, describe the same dynamic of relationships as a natural cycle of 4 stages. First comes the hunger, then the fulfillment, then comes saturation, and finally aversion. In this sense, relationships are not a linear story, now you found it and you're done, but a process that leads from projection to recognizing yourself. Ancient alchemy doesn't just speak about this idea, it describes in details 4 stages through which one needs to go through in order to obtain philosopher's stone, that is, wholeness. In classical alchemical tradition, the focus is not so much on transformation of metal, but the transformation of consciousness through the union of opposites. The central motive is the union that is experienced inside as divided, the feminine and masculine, spirit and matter, conscious and unconscious. And an important point is that this union is almost always projected outward, that is, onto another person. And before this union can happen inside, it has to go through 4 stages. Alchemy always starts with chaos, prima materia. Then it goes through the process of nigredo, blackening, which is breakdown, darkness, disillusionment. If you stay in this process and don't run away, the next phase that follows is albedo, whitening. This is when what was experienced between you and me starts to gather inside. Alchemy is very literal here. It speaks about the king and the queen, the sun and the moon, the bride and the groom. They unite. What follows is the citrinita stage, which is often associated with a new dawn and obtaining wisdom, until one reaches the final stage, rubedo, which means the unity of the matter and spirit, of conscious and ego, of feminine and masculine inside one person. Inspired by the work of alchemists, Carl Jung, who is considered to be the founder of contemporary analytical psychology, has developed the archetypes of so-called anima and animus, roughly the feminine and masculine principles, which move through 4 stages involving projections to reach the wholeness. He essentially translated this ancient truth into the language of our time. And today I'm not just going to speak about these 4 stages, I'm going to show them through very real examples from my own experience. So by the end of this video, you will not only know how this process works in theory, you will be able to see what stage are you in and what may still lie ahead. To understand these 4 stages, we first need to look at what Carl Jung called anima and animus. These are fundamental structures within human psyche. The animus represents the inner masculine part of a woman, and the anima is the feminine part of a man. When we are born, these energies are in perfect balance, but as we grow up, they are disrupted by the external influences. We face expectations and programs from our parents and society. We are told how to act to be successful or good. Some of the most common examples include boys don't cry, or girls' only purpose is to become a good wife and mother. To survive and fit in, we become to suppress those parts of ourselves that don't match this role. We push them into subconscious, our shadow. We think we make conscious decisions in our lives, but in reality these hidden parts are running the show. They drive our decisions and actions from behind the scenes. This is why we often repeat the same painful relationship patterns over and over again. We are projecting our suppressed parts onto other people. In Jungian psychology, the other person becomes a literal mirror. They reflect back to us the very qualities we have not accepted in ourselves. This is what Jung called projection. We might feel intense irritation, anger, or even obsession without understanding why. Usually it's because they are showing us something about our hidden nature. Self-awareness begins when we start to see this mechanism. Relationships are the most accessible way to do this because we interact with people every day. It's not an easy path because it requires us to interact with the things that we have kept hidden for the entire life. But it is the path of healing. By recognizing these projections, we can finally stop rejecting ourselves and finally achieve the inner wholeness. So the mechanism works as follows. A man projects his anima or inner woman into women, while a woman projects her animus or inner masculine onto man. Man's anima projections onto women bear female names: Eve, Elena, Maria, and Sofia. The first stage, Eve, is always a biological stage. At this stage, a woman is seen primarily as a mother or as an object of desire. The focus is on biological survival, comfort, and continuation of the family line. The man looks for a provider of domestic stability, someone who will take care of his home and children. The second stage is called Elena, and this is a romantic image. The woman here becomes an object of worship, social success, and beauty. Think of Helen of Troy. She is a trophy, she inspires men to do great things, but she is still just a projection, not a real person. The third stage is called Mary. This is where a woman is seen as a sacred figure. She is seen as a path to the divine. While this is considered a more elevated stage, there is a trap. A man puts a woman into pedestal to worship her, but is still failing to see the human behind the image. Finally, stage 4 is called Sofia. This is the highest stage. Sofia means wisdom. Here, anima becomes a mediator between man's conscious mind and his inner self. The projection is gone. The man has healed himself, and he is finally able to see a woman for the person she is without any projections. It's important to say that transitions from one stage to another is rarely a conscious choice, rather it is a forced evolution triggered by the collapse of the illusions. According to Jung, we move to the next stage only when the mirror of our partner can no longer hold the image that we have been projecting onto them. This moment of spiritual disillusionment is actually a spiritual breakthrough. It forces us to withdraw the projection, to take back the force, the wisdom, or the security that we thought was possessed by another person, but what has been inside us all along. Once we integrate that missing piece of us, our inner frequency changes, and we naturally gravitate to a different type of relationship which reflect our next level of maturity. Now, the 4 stages of animus, that is, women projecting inner masculine onto men, takes a similar path. It also has 4 stages. However, since I have been going through the process as a female, I will be elaborating more and providing examples from my own experience, not only based on theory provided by Jung, but on what I have been facing myself. Unlike with anima, the 4 stages of animus do not bear names, but they are described by roles. These roles are the provider or the master, the hero or the manager, the teacher, and the mediator. The first stage of animus is called the master or the provider. At this level, animus is projected as a figure of biological survival. He is a protector and provider of resources, but he comes with a price. He dictates the rules. To receive his protection, woman often needs to suppress her own individuality. Often this figure is a father, and this is exactly how this has manifested in my life. A father who has built what I can call a golden cage. I felt safe and provided for, but in exchange I subconsciously traded away my true self. This has manifested in me giving up my voice. I wrote my first book when I was 12 and then my second book when I was 15, but then I abandoned my writing completely for the next 20 years to please my father. I chose a professional path that matched his expectations rather than my own nature. I even subconsciously limited my own financial growth just to stay protected and connected to him. It took 3 years of therapy to finally see this pattern and reclaim my independence. In fact, my case may resonate with many women out there because, as I later discovered, this has manifested as a so-called Electra complex. It forms at very early age when father becomes the main male figure in the life of a girl, and if this stage is not lived through properly, it often leads to triangles in life where a woman finds herself competing for a man's attention with something third, like other woman, for instance, a mother, or a wife. This is a very common case for mistresses of married men, or even compete for attention of a man with his work. Now, the second stage of animus becomes more grounded and social. This is an animus becoming a manager of life, a man who knows how to build a career, a home, a stable family. He offers reliability, but he's often far from deep reflections or spiritual search. In my life, this has manifested as a man whom I get a marriage proposal from, who was representing exactly this. He offered stability, but his motto was, be content with what you have. It was comfortable, but it offered no room for growth. Now stage 3 is called the teacher or the logos. Here the animus becomes the word. The man is now seen as the carrier of the spiritual truth, meaning, philosophy. This is when woman projects her own need for purpose onto a guru, spiritual teacher, or intellectual leader. This stage might be perceived and be felt like a very blissful one, because you finally meet someone who joins your path of searching for God and for the meaning. However, in my experience, it has manifested in the form of a spiritual narcissist. This is a very common and dangerous dynamic. Narcissist is someone who requires constant external validation, and someone who hasn't realized their own worth yet becomes a perfect source of energy for them. You feel an intense, almost telepathic connection and believe this person is your other half. But in reality, you are projecting your own spiritual power onto them. A narcissist becomes a great vessel for this projection because he himself is persuaded in his own exceptionalism. You think you need their presence to feel inspired and connected to the divine, but the lesson of this stage is to learn that the prophet that you are looking for outside has always been inside you. The narcissist appears in your life only to show you that you have been looking the savior outside yourself. This is exactly what is often called nowadays a twin flame dynamic, a push and pull cycle. I promise to go into more details about the dysfunctional dynamic of the so-called twin flames in the next episode, as this has been a very extensive and very important experience in my life, which I believe might help a lot of people to make the important next step. Because the next step is stage 4, the inner union. This is the final stage where the animus becomes a mediator between your ego and the true self. This is the inner union, the alchemical conjunctio oppositorium, the yin and yang, the Shiva and Shakti inside you. At this stage, you no longer need external validation. You have developed an inner core that doesn't depend on anyone else's approval. You can finally see people as they are, not as the mirrors for your own healing. This wholeness allows for a completely new kind of relationships, the one based on synergy. When two whole individuals come together, 1 + 1 does not equal 2, it equals 11. You are no longer feeling a hole in yourself. You are creating something massive together because you have already found the sacred union within. In the next episode, we'll go into details of these particular stages or particular experiences related to what have been discussed in this episode. Subscribe if you feel called.